A very good afternoon to you. This is your daytime update as we continue keeping you abreast of all the day's breaking and developing stories. Now, government has promised that the slow vaccine rollout campaign will gain momentum this very month. This, as Johnson & Johnson is one of the companies that is set to start supplying the country with large numbers of doses in April. For more on this, as well as its vaccination plans, we'll speak to Mr. Francisco Plaza. He is the Managing Director of Janssen South Africa, which is part of the Johnson & Johnson network. A very good afternoon to you, Mr. Plaza, and thank you so much for your time today. Now, at the end of March, we saw the President of the Republic as well as an entourage visiting the factory in Gqeberha to much excitement around the country. But if you could put everything into perspective for us, what role will that particular Aspen Pharmacare factory be playing in the vaccination plan and vaccination rollout?
Good afternoon, Thami, and good afternoon to the audience. Thank you for having me. Let me start by saying what our role as Janssen, as Johnson & Johnson, will be in fighting this pandemic. Because as part of the government vaccination plan, our responsibility, our commitment is to develop, first of all, is to develop a safe and effective vaccine. And we are doing that based on three principles. The first one is developing a vaccine that can be easily administered with a single dose. Together with the simplicity in the distribution, because the vaccine can be stored at temperatures compatible with other vaccination programs, the single-dose administration will facilitate mass vaccination. The second principle is to distribute this vaccine on a non-for-profit basis during the pandemic. And last but not least, we are committed to an equal distribution in which no country will be left behind. A testimony of that is our recently announced commitment to deliver 220 million doses to the African Union. What we are doing now is building our manufacturing capacities, building our partnerings across the globe, and the Aspen facility in South Africa it is part of this global network to expand our manufacturing capacities and trying to produce as much as vaccines as we can.
So my understanding, Mr. Plaza, is that the actual vaccines will not necessarily be produced in South Africa, will not necessarily be produced at that particular factory, but instead that they will be imported into the country in frozen form and then liquefied and just packaged at that factory. Is that indeed the process?
Well, the process is extremely complex. As you can imagine, fighting a global pandemic requires global solutions. And this is why Johnson & Johnson is partnering with different stakeholders all across the globe. And all together with those partnerings, including Aspen, we will be able to deliver the doses that the world would need to fight the pandemic. What we expect is that the doses produced at the Aspen facility will be an essential part of the distribution in South Africa and in the continent. So it's going to be part of a global network with a strong and relevant presence as part of the solution from our partner at Aspen.
So you are saying, I just want to confirm, that there will actually be production at the Aspen plant in Gqeberha?
Well, as soon as the plan will be ready and with all the regulatory approvals, we will expect that Aspen will play a critical role in delivering doses not only to South Africa, but to the rest of the continent as well, and to our global supply network. So Aspen, obviously, it's going to play a critical role in fighting against the vaccine, which is against the virus, which is, by the way, the most relevant thing and the focus that we all should have, is that we are all together fighting against the virus. And this is why all the news regarding approvals, regarding regulatory reviews, regarding new vaccines added to the armamentarium are so very well welcome, because we will need all these collective efforts to fight the virus.
Let's confirm some timelines here. We did hear the President of the Republic saying April is the month where the mass rollout of the vaccination process will actually happen. Does that coincide with the timelines and the production workflow that you yourselves have?
Well, thank you for the question. And you can imagine that there are a number of moving pieces, and we are all fighting against the clock to deliver on those commitments. Our expectation is that as it was announced, the first batches of our vaccine will be available during the second quarter, and we are trying to deliver, as it was said, during the second half of April. So our commitment, and we are on track to deliver on that commitment, is that we will be able to start delivering doses to South Africa very soon during this quarter.
Now, Sahpra has finally approved the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, but earlier on, South Africans were wondering what is the difference between what was happening with the Sisonke vaccine trial, because the terminology that's used for that particular trial is not necessarily a vaccine trial, but an implementation study. That's the terminology and how you have phrased it. What then is the difference between a vaccination trial and an implementation study?
Well, thank you again for the question. I think it's important to clarify what the differences are. What the Sisonke trial is a clinical trial, it's a phase 3B clinical trial, and as you said, it's an implementation study. It's an implementation study, and probably this is one of the main differences versus the Ensemble clinical trial that was conducted at the end of last year, is that you have only 1 arm in which all the participants will receive an active vaccine. While in the Ensemble trial, you had a placebo arm and you were testing the result of the vaccine against placebo. In the Sisonke trial, all the subjects participating are receiving an active vaccine that has proven to be efficacy in our previous clinical trials.
All right, well, thank you so much for your time, as well as all that information as South Africa gets ready for the Johnson & Johnson mass vaccination program. That was Mr. Francisco Plaza, the Managing Director of Janssen South Africa, which is part of the Johnson & Johnson network.